We swore we'd take this to the grave. That's what Annabel told me the night it happened. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely light her cigarette. No matter what, she whispered, we never speak of this again. And for 50 years we didn't. But now Annabel's gone and I'm the last one left. And I can't carry this anymore. I just can't. In the summer of 1972, 4 ordinary people made a promise in a small town in Pennsylvania. They weren't criminals. They weren't bad people. They were just kids, really, trying to navigate a world that seemed to be falling apart around them. Vietnam was tearing families in two. Nixon was on every television screen. And in towns like Millbrook, everyone knew everyone's business, or at least they thought they did. What happened that August night changed everything. Someone vanished. No body was ever found. No arrests were ever made. And the people who knew what really happened, they buried it so deep that even they started to believe their own lies, until the guilt became too much to bear. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Millbrook, Pennsylvania, 1972. Population 3,200. The kind of place where you could leave your doors unlocked and your kids could ride their bikes until the streetlights came on. Annabel Crowley, David Foster, Catherine Walsh, and Robert Mitchell grew up on the same street, went to the same schools, shared the same dreams of getting out someday. Annabel wanted to be a nurse in Philadelphia. David talked about joining the Air Force. Catherine had been accepted to a college in New York, full scholarship. And Robert, well, Robert just wanted to fix cars and maybe open his own garage one day. They'd known each other since kindergarten. They'd shared first crushes, failed tests, broken curfews. They were family in every way that mattered, bonded by years of late-night conversations on Catherine's front porch and summer days at the quarry just outside town. That summer was supposed to be their last hurrah before everything changed, before real life pulled them in different directions. They had 2 months to make memories that would last forever. None of them could have known just how true that would be. It started innocently enough. Weekend parties at the old Miller barn, cheap beer and cheaper wine. Bob Dylan on someone's transistor radio, dancing in the grass under stars that seemed closer than they'd ever be again. They felt invincible the way young people always do, like nothing bad could touch them, like the future was this bright, shining thing just waiting for them to reach out and grab it. But something was changing. You could feel it if you paid attention. David had gotten quieter since his brother came home from Saigon. Annabel's father had lost his job at the steel mill. Catherine's parents were fighting constantly, their voices carrying through open windows on humid nights. And Robert, he'd started drinking more, staying out later, picking fights with anyone who looked at him wrong. Then there was James Hartley. He'd moved to Millbrook that June with his mother after his parents divorced. 22 years old, too old to still be living at home, but too broke to be anywhere else. He got work at the gas station on Route 15, pumping gas and changing oil for minimum wage. James wasn't like the others. He was from Pittsburgh, talked differently, dressed differently, wore his hair longer than most folks in Millbrook appreciated. Some people said he was trouble. Others said he was just misunderstood. What nobody disputed was that Catherine had fallen for him and fallen hard. They'd met when her car broke down on the way back from the quarry. James fixed it for free, refused to take her money, said her smile was payment enough. It sounds like a line from a movie, doesn't it? But according to Annabel, that's exactly what he said. Within 2 weeks, Catherine and James were inseparable, and that's when the problems started. Robert had been in love with Catherine since they were 14 years old. Everyone knew it except Catherine herself, or maybe she knew and just pretended she didn't. Either way, watching her with James was killing him slowly. The way she'd laugh at his jokes, the way she'd touch his arm when she talked to him, the way she'd look at him like he'd hung the moon just for her. Annabel tried to talk to Catherine about it, told her she needed to be careful, that Robert was hurting. But Catherine was 20 years old and in love for the first time in her life, and she wasn't about to let anyone tell her how to feel. David stayed out of it mostly, said people's hearts were their own business. But you could see the tension building like storm clouds on a summer afternoon. Every time the 5 of them were together, which was often because Millbrook was too small to avoid anyone, you could feel it. The sideways glances. The clipped conversations. The way Robert would grip his beer bottle so tight his knuckles went white whenever James put his arm around Catherine. August 14th, 1972. It was a Saturday night, the kind of sticky, oppressive evening where the heat doesn't break even after the sun goes down. There was a party at the quarry, nothing official, just kids and beer and a bonfire. Annabel didn't want to go. She told me years later that she had a bad feeling, like something in her gut telling her to stay home. But Catherine begged her, said she needed her there because she was going to introduce James to everyone properly, make it official. So Annabel went, David went, Robert went, even though everyone knew he shouldn't. And of course, Catherine went with James. The party was crowded, maybe 40 or 50 people, music playing from someone's car radio, couples dancing in the firelight. For a while, everything seemed fine. Normal, even. Annabel sat on a log talking to some girls from her nursing class. David was throwing a football around with some guys he'd gone to high school with. Catherine and James were off by themselves, sitting on the hood of his car, looking out at the water. And Robert was drinking, heavily. Annabel said she tried to slow him down, but he pushed her away, told her to mind her own business. Around 11 o'clock, things started to unravel. Robert walked over to where Catherine and James were sitting. Annabel couldn't hear what was said at first, but she saw Robert gesturing, his movements getting bigger, more aggressive. Then his voice got loud enough to carry over the music. "You don't even know him," Robert shouted. "He's been here 2 months and you're acting like he's the love of your life." Catherine stood up, her face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. "That's not your decision to make, Bobby. It's not your life. I've known you since we were 5 years old," Robert said, and Annabel said his voice cracked when he said it like he might cry. "Doesn't that mean anything?" James stepped between them, hands up in a calming gesture. "Hey man, let's just take it easy, okay? Nobody wants trouble." That's when Robert shoved him, not hard, but hard enough. James stumbled back a few steps, caught himself. The music had stopped now. Everyone was watching. David appeared out of nowhere, grabbed Robert's arm. "Come on, Bobby. Let's go cool off." But Robert jerked away, kept his eyes locked on James. "You think you can just come here and take whatever you want? This is my town, she's my—" He didn't finish the sentence. Catherine did it for him. "I'm not yours, Bobby, I'm not anybody's. And if you can't respect that, then maybe we're not friends anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke. Robert's face went pale, then red, then something else entirely, something broken. He turned and walked away, disappeared into the darkness beyond the bonfire. Annabel wanted to follow him, but David stopped her. "Let him go," David said. "He needs to walk it off." That was the last time any of them saw Robert Mitchell alive. Or at least, that's the story they told the police. When Robert didn't come home that night, his mother called Annabel's house at 7 in the morning. Mrs. Mitchell's voice was tight with worry, but not quite panic, not yet. Robert had stayed out all night before, slept it off in his car, or crashed on someone's couch. But by Sunday afternoon, when he still hadn't shown up, the worry turned into something harder to ignore. Annabel, David, and Catherine drove around town looking for him. They checked the diner where he usually got breakfast. They checked the garage where he worked part-time. They even drove out to the quarry, but it was empty, just beer cans and cigarette butts left over from the party. Monday morning, Mrs. Mitchell filed a missing person report. The Millbrook Police Department wasn't equipped for something like this. They had 3 officers and a chief who spent most of his time dealing with speeding tickets and noise complaints. But they did what they could. They questioned everyone who'd been at the party. They dragged the quarry, searched the woods, put up flyers with Robert's picture on every telephone pole in town. Annabel, David, and Catherine told them about the argument, about Robert walking off into the darkness. They said they assumed he'd gone home, that they'd figured he was fine. They didn't mention James. Nobody asked about James. Days turned into weeks. The search scaled back, then stopped altogether. The police chief told the Mitchells that Robert had probably run off, maybe hitched a ride out of town, started over somewhere else. Young men did that sometimes, he said, especially when they were hurting. Mrs. Mitchell didn't believe it. She knew her son, knew he wouldn't just leave without a word. But what could she do? The police had no leads, no evidence, no body. The case went cold. Life in Millbrook moved on the way it always does, slowly at first, then faster, until Robert Mitchell became just another sad story people told in hushed voices at the grocery store. But Annabel, David, and Catherine couldn't move on, not really. Because they knew something the police didn't. They knew what happened after Robert walked away from that bonfire. Annabel told me this part on a Tuesday in October 2021. We were sitting in her kitchen drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour before. Her hands shook as she spoke, and twice she had to stop because the tears came so fast she couldn't breathe. After Robert stormed off, maybe 20 minutes passed. The party was still going, but quieter now, awkward, the energy deflated. Catherine looked miserable, guilt written all over her face. James had left by then, said he didn't want to make things worse. David convinced Annabel and Catherine to go look for Robert, to apologize, to make sure he was okay. They took David's truck, drove the back roads around the quarry, scanning the ditches and tree lines. That's when they saw him. Robert was walking along Route 15, head down, hands in his pockets. David pulled up beside him, rolled down the window. "Come on, Bobby," David said. "Get in, let's go get some food and talk." Robert kept walking. Catherine leaned forward from the back seat. "Bobby, I'm sorry, I didn't mean what I said. You're one of my best friends. You'll always be one of my best friends." Robert stopped walking then, turned to look at them. Annabel said his eyes were red, whether from crying or drinking or both, she couldn't tell. "You don't get it," he said quietly. "I've loved you since we were kids, Kath, and I know you don't feel the same way. I've always known. But watching you with him, it's like losing you all over again every single day." Catherine got out of the truck, walked over to him. "You're not losing me. You could never lose me." She hugged him, and Annabel said Robert held on like he was drowning, and Catherine was the only thing keeping him above water. When they finally let go, Catherine convinced him to get in the truck. They'd go to the diner, get coffee, talk it through like they always had. Everything was going to be okay. David drove them back toward town, taking the long way so Robert could calm down. They were on Old Mill Road, a narrow two-lane stretch with thick woods on both sides when the deer appeared. David swerved. The truck went off the road, crashed through a wooden fence, rolled once, twice, came to rest upside down in a ravine. Annabel woke up hanging from her seatbelt, blood in her mouth, pain everywhere. She could hear groaning, could see David moving in the driver's seat. Catherine was unconscious but breathing, but Robert was gone. The back window was shattered and Robert wasn't in the truck. They found him 15 feet away, lying in the creek bed. His neck was bent at an angle that made Annabel's stomach turn. David climbed down to him, checked for a pulse. Nothing. Robert Mitchell was dead at 20 years old, killed instantly when he was thrown from the truck. Annabel said they sat there in the darkness for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Catherine had come to by then, crawled out of the truck with David's help. When she saw Robert's body, she started screaming. David was the one who said it first. "We can't tell anyone about this." Annabel stared at him. "What are you talking about? We have to call the police, we have to call an ambulance, we have to—" "Bobby's dead," David said flatly. "An ambulance won't help him, but if we call the police, they'll say I was driving drunk. They'll say I killed him. I'll go to prison, Anna. Is that what you want?" "You weren't drunk," Annabel said, but even as she said it, she remembered the beers David had been drinking at the party, 2, maybe 3. "I'll fail a breathalyzer," David said. "You know I will, and even if I don't, they'll find a way to make this my fault. Bobby's dead because of me." Catherine was still crying, gulping air like she couldn't get enough. "This is my fault. If we hadn't, if I just—" "It's nobody's fault," Annabel heard herself say, even though she didn't believe it. "It was an accident. The deer, it came out of nowhere." They stood there in the dark, 3 terrified kids trying to figure out what to do. And then Catherine said the thing that changed everything. What if we don't say we were here?" The words hung in the air like poison. "What are you saying?" Annabel asked. "I'm saying, what if we move him? What if we make it look like he was walking alone and fell into the ravine? What if we just leave?" "We can't do that," Annabel said, but her voice was weak. "We have to," Catherine said, more firmly now. "Think about it, Anna. David will go to prison. You and I will be charged with something too, leaving the scene, obstruction, I don't know. Our lives will be over. And Bobby, he's already gone. Nothing we do will bring him back." David was nodding. "She's right. If we do this smart, nobody has to know." "But what about his family?" Annabel said. "They deserve to know what happened." "They'll know he died," Catherine said. "They'll get closure, just not the whole truth." Annabel wanted to say no, wanted to refuse to do the right thing, to call for help and face whatever consequences came. But she was 20 years old and terrified, and these were her best friends, and Robert was dead, and nothing would change that. So she said yes. They spent the next 2 hours cleaning up the scene. They used creek water to wash the blood off Robert's face and hands, tried to make it look like he'd been alone. They hiked the truck out of the ravine, David using a winch he kept in the bed for emergencies. They drove it to a body shop 3 towns over, paid cash to have the damage fixed, no questions asked. And they made a promise, right there with Robert's body still warm in the creek. They would never speak of this to anyone. Not the police, not their families, not each other. What happened that night would die with them, or at least that's what they believed. Robert's body was found 3 days later by a hiker. The police ruled it an accident, said he must have been walking home drunk, lost his footing, fell into the ravine. Mrs. Mitchell fought the ruling, insisted her son wouldn't have been out there alone. But with no evidence to the contrary, the case was closed. The funeral was on a Thursday. Annabel said it rained so hard the cemetery flooded, like the sky itself was crying. Catherine couldn't stop shaking during the service. David stood stone-faced, didn't shed a single tear. And Annabel, she said she felt like she was watching herself from outside her body, like none of it was real. After the funeral, the three of them barely spoke. Catherine left for college 2 weeks later, never came back except for holidays. David joined the Air Force like he'd planned, served 4 years, came home different, quieter. Annabel stayed in Millbrook, became a nurse like she'd wanted, married a man she didn't love, had 2 kids she loved more than life itself. And they kept the promise. For 50 years, they kept the promise. But secrets have a way of eating you from the inside out. Catherine developed an ulcer in her 30s, was hospitalized twice for anxiety attacks. David came back from the Air Force with PTSD, but Annabel always wondered how much of it was Vietnam and how much was that night in the ravine. And Annabel herself, she said she couldn't look at herself in the mirror for years without seeing Robert's broken body in the creek. The guilt never faded. If anything, it got worse with time. Every milestone, every birthday, every Christmas, she thought about Robert and what he'd been robbed of. He never got to fix cars, never got to fall in love again, never got to become whoever he was supposed to be. And it was their fault. Not the accident, maybe, but everything after. They'd stolen his truth, stolen his family's right to know, stolen any chance of real justice. In 2019, Catherine died of a heart attack. She was 67 years old. Annabel and David went to the funeral in New York, stood in the back of the church, didn't say much to each other. After the service, Annabel found a letter in her mailbox. It was from Catherine, written weeks before she died. Annabel's hands were shaking so badly when she read it to me that I had to take the letter and read it myself. "Dear Anna," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I need to tell you that I can't do this anymore. I can't carry this weight. I've spent 47 years lying to myself, telling myself we did the right thing, that we had no choice. But we did have a choice, and we chose wrong. Robert deserved better. His family deserved better. I'm writing this down, Anna. I'm writing down everything that happened that night. And I'm leaving instructions for my lawyer to send it to the police when I die. I know you'll hate me for this. David will too. But I can't go to my grave with this secret. I just can't. I hope you can forgive me. I hope you can understand. And if you can't, well, I guess that's just one more thing I'll have to answer for. With love and regret, Catherine." Annabel said she read that letter 10 times before it sank in. Catherine had confessed. After all these years, she'd broken the promise. Annabel called David immediately, told him what Catherine had done. David was furious, said Catherine had betrayed them, thrown their lives away for nothing. But Annabel said something in her felt relieved, like a weight she'd been carrying for so long had finally been lifted, even if just a little. The police reopened Robert Mitchell's case based on Catherine's confession. They interviewed Annabel and David separately, confronted them with the evidence. At first, both of them denied everything, stuck to the story they'd told 50 years ago. But eventually, Annabel broke. She told them everything, just like I'm telling you now. David held out longer, but in the end, he confessed too. By then, Mrs. Mitchell had been dead for 10 years. Robert's father had died 5 years before that. The truth came out, but there was no one left to hear it, no one left to get closure. The statute of limitations had long since passed. No charges were filed. Legally speaking, Annabel and David were free, but Annabel said she'd never felt less free in her entire life. Annabelle died last month, January 2025. Cancer, quick and brutal. I visited her in the hospital 3 days before she passed. She was tiny in that bed, hollowed out by disease and guilt and time. "Do you think he'd forgive me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Robert, do you think he'd understand why we did what we did?" I didn't know what to say, still don't. "I think he'd understand you were scared," I told her. "I think he'd understand you were just kids trying to survive." She shook her head slightly. "We weren't kids, we were old enough to know better, old enough to do the right thing, we just chose not to." She was quiet for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling. Then she said, "Tell people, okay? Tell them what we did. Tell them what happens when you choose the easy lie over the hard truth. Tell them it never goes away. It just grows like cancer until it eats you alive. So I'm telling you. I'm telling you about 4 kids who made a promise in 1972. A promise to protect themselves, to avoid consequences, to bury the truth so deep it would never see daylight. And I'm telling you it didn't protect them at all. It destroyed them slowly, year by year, until there was nothing left but regret. Robert Mitchell died in a ravine in August 1972. But in a way, Annabelle, David, and Catherine died that night too. The people they could have been, the lives they could have lived without that weight, all of it died in that creek bed alongside their friend. Sometimes a promise feels like the only option, like the only way forward. But some promises aren't meant to be kept. Some secrets aren't meant to be carried. And some truths, no matter how painful, need to see the light of day. Because the alternative, the silence, the lying, the pretending it doesn't protect you, it poisons you. Was it worth it? That's the question Annabelle asked me the last time I saw her. Was 50 years of guilt, of broken sleep, of looking over your shoulder, was it worth avoiding a few years of legal consequences? She already knew the answer. So do you, if you're honest with yourself. What would you have done that night in 1972? Would you have called for help, faced the consequences, told the truth no matter what it cost? Or would you have made the same promise Annabelle, David, and Catherine made, believing it would protect you, believing time would make it easier? I'd love to know what you think. Leave a comment below, tell me how this story made you feel, tell me if you've ever kept a secret that ate away at you, tell me if you believe in second chances, or if some mistakes are too big to forgive. If this story moved you, if it made you think, hit that subscribe button. We share stories like this, real stories about real people facing impossible choices, every single week. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's carrying their own heavy secret, share this video with them. Sometimes the first step toward healing is knowing you're not alone. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth might hurt, but lies hurt worse. They just take longer to kill you.